今年2023 9月22号，我们来到了古华大饭店。
2023 Biennial International Conference of the Consortium of Global Hakka Studies.
客家界采取全球同多少
Local, global, and diversity of the Hakka begins now.
今日开始来到开班课程来参加礼拜嘅國際研討會，也萬邀請今年嘅貴賓上來同大家打招呼。
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Taiwan Taoyuan to attend this conference. Now let's welcome some distinguished guests to come up to the stage to say hello to everyone.
為咗配合2023年客家世界博覽會，以至全球客家研究聯盟舉辦了禮拜嘅研討會，主題係客家嘅採取全球同多少，國際專家同學者為持強客來討論全球環境下擺嘅客家身份嘅轉變。禮拜國際研討會主要係提升國際層面上同客家研究有相關嘅討論。
In conjunction with the 2023 World Hakka Expo, the Consortium of Global Hakka Studies, GHAS, organized today's conference, Local, Global, and Diversity of the Hakka. International experts and researchers will convene to discuss the shifting identity of the Hakka community in a global context. This international conference aims to enhance the discourse surrounding Hakka studies at an international level.
接落來會同大家紹介參加嘅貴賓。
In the very beginning, we are going to introduce the distinguished guest.
我是世界各地嘅客家研究學者，研究做得到台灣客家空氣好，主要是設計理論，它會非預測到客家共同嘅代表，係講將來係有技術共同嘅啲東西。因為今年嘅觀察嚟講因為講客家研究有幾隻嘅發展嘅情況呢隻期間嚟講係一個總發性嘅研究呢期間呢係客家性嘅研究，呢三期間因為很多落地性嘅研究。
这个桃园都属新竹的这个是新竹领先我们很多的地方。那今天非常欢迎大家有机会到这个桃园来看除了参加我们的学术研讨会之外，也希望大家能够有机会在桃园停留一下。海外的这个朋友们就多多观光，多多购物。那我们这个在地的在台湾的我们的客家乡亲们呢，就不妨去参观一下我们的客家世界客家博览会那还有附近的一些这个风景还有一些这个商场其实都蛮有特色的也预祝今天的学术研讨会顺利成功，大家收获满满也相信透过这样的研究，可以让我们客家的这个文化传承还有很多这个民族这个特色都能够让更多人知道那让更多的这些未来的下一代能够继续传承下去。谢谢。
我们讨论的是什么事情呢？我想来想去，我们要讨论的事情就是谈客家人、客家事、客家精神、客家天下。大家知道，有日台湾为首，只有客家人，有太阳的地方就有客家人。客家人在全世界分布每个地方都有。而且客家人非常肯干、实干，所以我说客家人不是应景硬讲你应景的话是讲实在是顽固客家人是讲脚长劲脚长劲动硬的脚长劲，表示说你做事情脚踏实地、肯干、实干，而且不辞辛苦，都愿意去做事情。抛头颅洒热血，这个就是客家人的精神。所以讲客家人，我们从近代史来看的时候，客家人真的是最有是非观念，最有这个苦人民之苦所以你看，这个国父的革命，黄花岗72烈士都是客家人。当时在推翻满清的这一批人都是客家人， 那你看看之前两岸三地的领导者都是客家人，现在我们的蔡总统是客家妹子啊，你看看新加坡的也是李光耀，他也是客家人，所以客家人是分布在各个地方，都很肯干，而且是被人家欺负，他都可以忍受，然后能够把他这个扳回来，这就是客家人。客家的是，我想刚才杨主委提到落地式的客家，我听了很有感。客家人真的是最有地气的。但你看看这个客家人一定会拜什么？拜土地公，把公把婆。你看他拜土地公的时候怎么讲？把公把婆啊，摸膝盖，摸膝翁，啊，膝家阿哥抢皮婆，啊，重要了抢腰拖，谢，你是谢了，不信哎呀，来唔好啊，抢一些条房间咯啊，哦。只有啥摸产多，专一砍走灯摸。你看看客家人多么的虔诚，多么的这样的尊敬土地公。他的意思是什么？我没有杀鸡，也没有杀鹅，只杀了一个鸭子。这个又像皮婆就蝙蝠的很瘦嘛，穷土啊，杀个鸭子像。
He's an organizer of the Hakka conference in New York area. So she is not only a Hakka descendant, she is a Hakka entrepreneur in the United States, and she is also a promoter of Hakka studies in the East Coast. Now next one is Douglas Carmen. Douglas Carmen, he's not Hakka, but does he look like Hakka? Yeah, okay, maybe look a little bit. But he worked on East Timor, which is a very rare case studies. So that's why we want him to come to give us.
To do my PhD research. I had already done some research in Singapore as a master's degree student on Chinese wigwams. And that research was very interesting, but working in an urban area was very difficult. Every time I did an interview, I had to introduce myself, and I came in as a stranger. And I really wanted to find a village in which to do my PhD research. So I knew that there were a lot of Chinese in Malaysia, but most of the Chinese in Malaysia in villages were in new villages. And new villages were, from my perspective, sort of artificial communities. I was looking for a place with a longer history. And another anthropologist at the University of Singapore who worked with the Temiar in Kelantan told me about this place called Pulai, which is in southern Kelantan and is Hakka. And he said that the people had been moved out of this village during the Malayan emergency, but they had moved back. I didn't know much about this village when I decided to do my research there. There was only one article written in 1933 by a British colonial servant by the name of Middlebrook, and that was all. But I decided that's where I wanted to go. So I found out it was Hakka, and I had already studied Mandarin for many years, but I realized that I needed to study Hakka before I went. The only place in the world that I could find to study Hakka was Taiwan. So I came to Taiwan, and the place where Hakka was taught was the Taichung branch of the Taipei Language Institute. So I spent about 8 months in Taichung studying Hakka, some more months back in Taipei working again on my Mandarin, and headed off to the village in Malaysia. When I was in Taiwan, I was very interested in learning as much as I could about Hakka things. So I attended Hakka folk singing competitions in Miaoli. I went to Hakka weddings in the countryside. I went to visit my teacher's Hakka family and so on and so forth. And when I got to Malaysia and the village in Pulai, I thought, okay, I brought with me some tapes of Hakka songs from Taiwan and my newly acquired Hakka language. I was very fortunate. There was a local photographer who had a photograph studio who was Hakka, and he had some spare time in the afternoons, and he was in the neighboring town in Guamusang, and so he taught me the vocabulary for Kulai Hakka so that I could interview in Hakka when I went to do household interviews if the person did not speak Mandarin. But if the person spoke Mandarin, my Mandarin was always superior to my Hakka. So I would, but mostly it would be older women who didn't speak Mandarin. And I could understand in those interviews, my Hakka was okay to understand, their answers to the questions. But most of the people
and speak Hakka to the God. That's interesting. I think this is a common thing. I think the daily life, the mother tongue is no longer practiced that often, but in a special occasion, in the association, in a Huiguan, they speak Hakka.
Actually, in daily life in Pulai, they speak Hakka. They still communicate in Hakka. I was there just a couple of years ago,
oh, okay.
and what I heard around me, young people sometimes Mandarin. So if you look at generation, I did some generational language studies too, and it wasn't just with Hakka, but you could look at the senior generation.
I asked him to do something that was unusual, and it was unusual because my family had been separated. I can tell that story, but I asked him if he would give his sister, my mother, who he had never met, her Hakka name, and so he did. First telling me that it's not usual for someone to be named posthumously after death. What I said is that everything about our family is unusual, so let's just continue the theme. At which point I asked my uncle if he could give everyone, all my mother's descendants, their Hakka names, and so we all have Hakka names. So how did I come to be involved in Hakka studies? I think that as a child, being born in
far more schools per population than in Malaysia or Indonesia or Thailand. I studied Mandarin a long time ago when my Chinese is terrible, and so this book sat on the shelf. Until a very bright Singaporean master's student came along, and I suggested that he take a look at it. And he wrote a paper turned into a 6-year project. And we never intended to write a book about the history of the Chinese in Timor. We were simply curious.
In Southeast Asian marketing, not just broadly Chinese, but Hakka Chinese or Chinese Hakka. Am I correct?
Exactly.
Okay, good. That's what I want to get a point to do that. Okay, now, Kathleen, that's your turn now. Kathleen.
Thank you very much. So I entered this field as a historian of China and modern China, and I was initially interested in the role that Chinese overseas, Huachao, played in the 1911 revolution. So Sun Yat-sen, Yan Qichao, Kang Youwei, people like that. And I was researching Chinese overseas communities in the United States and realized these revolutionaries also went to South America, places like Peru, and the Caribbean, places like Cuba. So I started in Chinese history.
好，所以数字会看到是很概述的、很大范围的，不会很精准。那再来是他们的印象啊，或许会停留在小时候。那现代的状况是如何？可能老一辈的人没有同步更新，好，所以这个数字有待上去，但可以作为一个大概的参考。好，所以清来市呢，华人大约占了60%，那多数的是客家，潮州次之，再来是云南人，好，那他们大部分是在70年、80年前移入的。那现在的清来 60岁到80岁，这个是属于在泰国的第2代，他们是在泰国出生的，接受过泰国的义务教育。好，那现在第1代大部分已经凋零，清莱市区会看到的华人年纪最长的，大部分是第2代的。好，那再来是跟大家简述清莱的客家人、客家话、客家语、华语和泰语的使用状况。大家可以看到，